So my first idea is, let's all carry on lying. Brilliant.
Perfect. And society will stay intact. So that's good.
Yes.
And we'll all have a social life. And
Hello and welcome to The World as It Should Be, a podcast in which we ask our guests to tell us what they would change to help create their perfect world.
by listening to what they'd like to change, we'll hear more about who they are, what they do, and what inspires them.
This podcast is brought to you by the team behind Prima Donna, a uniquely anarchic and joyous festival of everything creative.
My name is Shona Abianca, and I'm a book publicist working with some of the most thought-provoking authors writing today.
I'm Catherine Riley, a writer and director of the festival. We're delighted to be your guides on this podcast adventure. The World as It Should Be from Prima Donna.
Adele Parks is one of the most loved and biggest selling women's fiction writers in the UK. Her first novel was published in 2000, and since then she's sold 4 million books and been translated into more than 30 different languages.
Adele has published 20 best-selling novels in 20 years, including the number one bestsellers Lies, Lies, Lies and Just My Luck.
She is a proud ambassador for the National Literacy Trust and the reading agency's 6-Book Challenge, which encourages less confident readers to fall in love with their books.
Adele is a judge for the Costa Book Awards and the British Book Awards. Her next book, Both of You, will be published on the 27th of May. Adele, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, lovely to be here.
Very happy, very excited to have you here. So before we get started on your version of The World as It Should Be, would you like to tell us about Both of You, as I know it's a hotly anticipated release?
Well, yes, but I'm pretty unpracticed. I think this is the first time I've spoken about it.
Really?
Which is super exciting. So Both of You is the story of 2 different women who both go missing from London within the same week. One of them is Lee Fletcher. She's happily married stepmom of 2 sort of tween-age boys. She goes missing on Monday. She just goes to work and just doesn't come home. And her husband says he knows nothing about her whereabouts. The family is shattered. Then we meet Kai Jansen. She's married to a wealthy Dutch businessman. He, too good looking for his own good. They live in a penthouse, very different lifestyle altogether. But she vanishes the same week. And whilst there doesn't seem to be a connection between these 2 women, anyone who's ever lived in any city, it doesn't have to be London, but I think in particular in London, we can live cheek by jowl with very, very different types of people. And the female detective in charge of the case, while she's very aware that sadly people do go missing, people run away from things, people run towards things, there's no reason to connect these 2 women, but at a gut level she believes they are connected, and the book is about what is their connection.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Well, I hope so. There's so many twists and turns in this book that I am terrified of giving anything away. There's about 5 things I could have given away in just that introduction. So I was speaking very carefully, which, as you'll see throughout this podcast, I speak very fast most of the time and not particularly carefully. And suddenly I have to be a bit more aware because I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah, spoiler alerts. So that sounds like, from what you've just said, it's a very complicated plot. How do you go about writing your books? Is it a post-it note wall? Like, how do you do it? I'm
quite the planner. Books stay in my head for a long time before I commit them to any kind of paper. The truth is, people quite often say, 20 books, 20 years, this is my 21st book. How do you get the ideas? And I say, actually, the problem isn't getting the ideas. You quite often get an idea, but once you start to examine it, you realize it's not a strong enough idea. It might be a short story or a poem. It might not necessarily be a novel. So I keep books in my head and play with them for quite a long time and play with the characters for quite a long time. Then I commit to paper via a good old-fashioned spidergram. Do you remember those as a child at school? Yes. And you sort of, with this one, I put Both of You at the sort of center of the page in a circle. And then I had Kai's name going one way and Lee another way, and sort of then constructed their families around these 2 women and then the detective, and then started making the links between them. The next stage for me is I jot out what will or won't happen in chapters. And that's usually not much more than a line per chapter. And then after all of that, which will take a few months, when I'm absolutely chewing at the bit and want to get go, I will finally allow myself to write. And then theoretically, it ought to write itself, if you've got that level of plan. And most of the time they do. Most of the time they work quite well for me.
That's amazing. So the actual writing process is quite quick. It's the formulation, the gestation of the story, I guess.
Also very interesting that do you normally come up with the titles and the character names at the beginning? Because sometimes I know authors, they have no idea what they're going to be called or what the title should be.
Yes, I think it varies. Character names I'm normally pretty good at, and I normally invest some level of meaning in my characters' names, whether that's their surnames or birth names. But I don't always know the title. And even if I think I know the title of my book, my publishers might not think I know the title of the book. This one was always going to be either both of you or both of them.
Right.
And we just I think we all agreed quite early on that both of you, which sort of when you write it quickly, it says boy, and that was easier than bot. I think it was something as infantile as that helped us choose this title.
It's also very powerful. I remember that Netflix series called You, which I don't know if you saw, but was that creepy.
Awesome.
Yes, but it's a very powerful word, isn't it, to have?
Yes, it is. It's frightening. And we all immediately put ourselves in that position. So are they, it's that feeling of, so is the author talking to me? Could I be this person? Could I be one of the women? Could I be one of the husbands? So there's all sorts of levels, I think, if you use me or you or any of those kind of things, where them, it sort of removes what once more. So actually the title takes quite some thinking about. I was joking about my publishers there. I mean, the truth is I adore my publishers, and I'm very, very open to any suggestion they have, because I know we've both got the same aim, which is producing the best book possible, packaging it in the best possible way, and getting it out to the largest possible audience. And I think that's quite interesting, because I think that's not necessarily what you possibly believe at the beginning of your career, where there is a bit more of a them and us situation, or you believe there to be. And I'm always saying to debut authors, honestly, the publishers are on your side. They're not trying to catch you out.
Yeah, it's very true. And also, I think we forget sometimes it's not just about the marketing, but sometimes publishers will have inside knowledge of what else is coming out around the same time.
Yes,
and there could be a very similar title. Yeah.
I think with my publishers, that I would fully expect them to just tell me that, and then I'd immediately go, oh, okay, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, it's fascinating. I mean, I'm dying to know whether any of the characters are based on people you know.
Do you know what? I don't write other people's stories, largely because it's a really great way to lose friends, and I've written more books than I've got friends, so I don't think that's a really good option. But the truth is, your friends who you know very, very well are, of course, you love them and they're fascinating because they're your friends, but you do know their backstory. But interestingly, they are usually, hopefully, God willing, still in the middle of their story, and therefore they don't neatly package themselves up with a beginning, middle and end the way it is rather necessary to do in a novel. So I found my friends are desperately uncooperative in comparison to the characters I make up. But I do magpie pick things from certain people. And there are people, and sometimes I meet people just for a very short period of time. In the days when we were having sort of live events, I would quite often see somebody in an audience and think, gosh, you're fascinating, and sort of zone in on them and think either something about their physicality or a twitch they might have or a question they might ask. And because I don't know that person, it's much easier for me to make up a character around them. So that's more likely what I do. I pick up little bits of people I know. Or in this case, when I have a police person. And so, of course, I had to research police people. And then you start talking to them and think, oh, you've all got a bit of a way of talking to each other and a bit of a use of language that I really need to incorporate. So I would say my character, my DC, that she's an amalgamation of several police people that I spoke to.
Last summer, I climbed up Ben Nevis.
Wow.
Which was, yeah,
Can
I'm
I
not
just
saying.
say, first off,
He's such a show off.
let's have that.
I'm not. That's the end of the story. No.
That's the tweet.
And I got to the top, and there was a man who I was starting the descent, and he was still walking up towards me, and he was in full lycra, in every color of lycra I've ever seen, and he had mirrored shades on and a pot belly, and he just was really extraordinary looking, and he had a tattoo that said "Living the Dream to the Extreme" on him. And he, as we walked past him, he saw that he was nearly at the summit, and he just whispered to himself, "Oh, thank God!" Like that.
Oh,
and I remember
brilliant.
thinking, I'll never forget it. Like, if I ever need to write an extraordinary walker into a story that I'm writing, then like that's the guy that, you know.
Wow.
So I understand.
And
that
also
kind of,
immediately I'm thinking, right, so he's making such a statement by being so careful.
Something has happened.
Absolutely.
Exactly. What's his backstory? Who did he lose? What did he, I'm not saying this particular.
No, I very
did,
much
but,
assumed there was a wife that had
there's
left
a reason.
him.
Yeah.
So I understand
Fascinating.
that.
That kind of segues quite nicely, Adele, onto the first of the 3 ways that we ask our guests how you would change the world to make it as it should be. Could you tell us the first way you would change the world?
Well, I had a giggle to myself after I came up with this idea, because when I came up with it, I thought it was a brilliant idea, which is that we were all going to be born without the ability to lie. But then I realised I would be out of a job.
We would all be out of a job.
Out of a job, because, not only are my plots nearly 100, well, they are 100% dependent on my characters lying. But of course, actually, I get paid to professionally lie, that I make things up for a living. I am a liar for a living, So after me saying, it'd be really good in the world if, we were all born not able to lie, I thought, actually, it would probably be devastating and quite chaotic.
Do you know what, though? If we were allowed to lie for a living, so if you could write a book and your character could say everything, then there'd be many more books in the world.
Well, yes, and I suppose we'd depend more heavily as well on fiction, because we'd all be quite boring. But it would be the reason I thought the world would be better if you couldn't lie. How much confusion is dependent on people telling one another lies. But there are some lies that are very helpful and save feelings. And, we all tell that one to, I don't know, our mothers. How are you? I'm fine. I've been lying to my mother forever. I'm fine. Everything's brilliant. My life's amazing, because that's what comforts her. That's what she needs to hear.
What is the worst lie you've told, either to your mum or anyone?
I think the lies, they're so bad that I feel that if I'm doing quite well as a person right now. Like, most people quite like me if I start telling you the lies I tell. I've told all sorts of lies in my time. I've told lies about, everything. I don't think, I'm going to be honest, I don't think there's anything in my life I haven't ever lied about at some point or other. Isn't that terrible? And I consider myself as a really decent, honest human being. But I think I've done all the lies, like when you don't turn up for work on time and you say, oh, traffic, or I've done the lies where even with your best friend, I am going to lose all my friends after this, but even with my best friend, where you just can't really be bothered to go around their house that night, but you tell them that, something major's cropped up in your family, and then you get masses of sympathy for weeks and you feel dreadful because you can't, So I have told lies about health. I've told lies about, when I was a lot younger, I have told lies about who I don't do or don't love, which I think is a major one, and I think most of us have done that. There've been men I've been in love with that I haven't told I loved them. There've been men I've not loved, and it's just for ease. I've said that I do. That's a terrible thing. I'm mortified. A lot younger human being, but I think I have lied for ease many a time. Yeah. And it never is easy. It never is. It always causes trouble. I'm actually married to an incredibly honest person, and my sister's incredibly honest. It's very, very infuriating. Both of them are incredibly infuriating. And interestingly, neither of them drink. So they don't even do that sort of lie where you just embellish a really funny story to make it even funnier.
So you can't even ply them with wine or beer?
No, they're both really straight.
See, normally we fully endorse, the three things that people come on but I can't get behind this.
I've talked myself out of it. I know. I came up with it. I thought it was really brilliant, and then I thought, no, it's dreadful. I'm really shooting myself.
I understand entirely the sentiment behind it, because of course we're lied to all the time in not kind
I meant
way.
politics.
Of course,
and
social media.
When I first started it, yes, when I came up with it. I thought, it'd be really good just to have the government not lying to us, or just knowing real statistics about things, or the press, or whatever it would be. And now I'm going, no, it's awful.
No,
I don't think I'd have lived this old.
No relationships would survive. No friendships would. Yeah. So anyway, it's a great idea. Ditch it. Ditch it. Fine.
So my first idea is, let's all carry on lying. Brilliant.
Perfect. And society will stay intact. So that's good.
Yes.
And we'll all have a social life, and we'll have friends.
Yes.
Marriages will also stay intact. It's all good.
Correct.
Okay. Let's move on to your second wish for a better world.
Well, interesting. I suppose these are a little bit related, because I think at the moment, and I say at the moment, I would say in the last year, maybe two, might be pre-pandemic. I can't remember, because I fade out pre-pandemic right now because it's too painful to visit. But I think there's a lot of talk at the moment about people acting kindly, and people pay a lot of lip service to it, but I'm not sure how kind we actually are. And I think it would be really lovely if we all actually acted kindly, but didn't talk about it. Just didn't talk about it. It went back to very old-fashioned sort of values of doing lovely, kind, charitable, decent, human being things, but not talking about it.
Yeah. And actually going back to the pandemic, at the beginning of, March and April last year, people did kind of spontaneously start being kind to one another. They were looking out for their neighbour. I'm not sure. I'm not saying it should take a global pandemic to provoke this seismic shift, but yeah, absolutely. They
did, and I'm sure they do. And let's hope we all are still being kind to one another, and we've just got bored of talking about it. But I did get to the point where I was thinking, it feels to me, if you're pointing out that you're taking jam to your neighbours, you've almost negated the fact you took jam to your neighbour. They just felt a little bit exhausted.
And also, are you lying? Did you actually take jam to your neighbour?
Well, can I say, in all honesty, my neighbour does bring marmalade to me. And
nice.
God love her, she's in her 80s.
Oh,
I know.
She's not tweeting that.
No, she's not. No, she's really not.
She's just doing it.
Throughout the pandemic, she kept bringing me marmalade, and I kept saying, Anne, it's really meant to be
so
way on love. Yeah.
Wow, you must have a lot of marmalade left over.
Well, luckily, I say luckily, unluckily for my son, he was sent home from university and he's got a really good appetite for marmalade, which is why the lovely neighbour makes it, because she knows she's making it for my son, who she's known from being a little tiny child. So yes, so there's a lot of layers to that.
So before we spoke today, Adele, I spoke to somebody who is a mutual friend of ours, and I said, "What's the best thing about Adele?" And I'm going to embarrass you a little bit now. And she said, unprompted, well, that was the prompt rather. She said her answer was, "Adele is super kind." That was the first thing she said, and then she went on to say she is a patron for the National Literacy Trust and a real supporter. She genuinely loves her readers, and she is a very generous and brave writer and a team player. Also, she's written 20 books in 20 years. Can you guess who wrote that?
I think it's Lisa.
It's Lisa Milton.
Yes. Her check is in the post.
Isn't that lovely though? That's the first thing she said, was that she mentioned your kindness. So I thought it was great that she said that, because that was one of the things that you value, obviously, most.
I do value it. I think, if you that thing, most of us were brought up being told, if you've nothing kind to say,
Yeah.
don't speak at all. Well, I don't think that's absolutely true. I think we are allowed to speak, Mum, just saying. I have opinions that might not be in line with yours. But I do think that I catch myself doing it. If I am snappy or, you know, and I was today, I was snappy about something. And then I thought, that's just really mean. You didn't need to do that. So I always try and come back from it and say, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. And let's move on. And I think everybody, it always works. It's equally if you see somebody in a street really angry or somebody honks the horn at you. If you honk back, that's going to end badly. If you kind of go, oh, sorry, or my bad, or whatever it might be, or just shrug. If it wasn't your bad, just shrug. But yeah, you can get through it. Don't take responsibility for other people's bad. I'm not saying that, but you know, I think kindness is a good thing.
Do you think kindness is a good thing to write about? Like, lots of your books are dark. Obviously, no. Do you think it's a more interesting reader experience to write about unkindness?
Do you know, the strange thing is, I think more people are kind than are unkind. I think generally speaking, we're pretty decent as beings. And so we know kindness, where shocking things that happen in my novels, you know, really frightening betrayals and double crossings and all that sort of thing. It's quite exciting for people to read, and certainly exciting to write, and I hope it's exciting to read because it's unlike us. And I think that's why people like exploring thrillers or domestic noir, call them what you will, because we like to look at our dark side. But generally speaking, whilst I have a slightly different view of, but take Just My Luck, the last book, not the one that's coming out, but the last book, that whole premise was about how money can rip people apart. Somebody wins the lottery, everybody else wants a share. I talked to endless lottery winners to research that and heard, you know, an awful lot of sort of sensationalized, headline-grabbing stories about unkindness and cruelty because of money. But in the background, quietly, people were saying, oh, yeah, but I bought my sister a house and I sent my son to my nephew through uni, or I donated to charities. So there was a lot of really good stuff just happening in the background. That wouldn't make me a novel, I'm afraid. They want, you know, we want a bit of, kidnaps and extortion and adulteries and deceits, and we want it all.
Yeah,
but
just like it wouldn't
life.
make the headlines, would it? You'd
Correct.
want something a bit darker and a bit more shocking.
Yes.
Yeah, you want a vicarious experience of unkindness rather than the actual experience.
Quite. And I suppose it's like if you go on a fairground ride, and we all love sort of being terrified on a roller coaster, but it's terrifying because we know we're on a roller coaster and it's a ride and it's going to stop. None of us would really like to be in that kind of car chase or, you know, for real.
Yeah. Do you think reading helps us be kinder?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And I'm not alone in thinking that. That has been sort of researched. And I think a number of reasons. If you don't read, you live one life, really. You live your own life. And if you do read, and this isn't my quote, I can't even remember where I read it dozens of years ago, but I believe it firmly. If you do read, you get to live hundreds of lives. And that increases your ability to be empathetic and sympathetic and see things from different viewpoints. And that is so important as part of kindness, because it's easier to be kind if you think, gosh, they might be having a really lousy day too, you know, rather than just being about yourself. So I do think reading helps with that. Reading helps with so many things. You know, obviously it's entertaining, obviously it's educational, but I think one of the most exciting things about reading, and it isn't often talked about, but I do talk about it with my work with the National Literacy Trust and the Reading Agency, is it's incredibly empowering. It helps you find your voice. It gives you, you know, not only helps you develop a vocabulary so you can express yourself with more nuance, but besides that, it helps you understand enough of the world to think, that's the bit I agree with, that's the bit I don't agree with. I want to talk about that, which I think is exciting.
It is. Which books have you read that made you think, wow, that's an amazing character? Or was there a light bulb moment of a book you read and you thought, I want to write?
I wanted to write since I was about 6 years old. And it was suggested to me by a librarian, which I love the fact that my entire career is down to a librarian. So my sister's 3 years older than I am. So it is the lot of the younger child to always be waiting around. And we had a little local library near our school. So my mum quite sensibly said, wait around in the library. And so I visited the library every day and read an awful lot. And so quite early on, I think I was about 6 or 7, a librarian said to me, do you think one day you might grow up and become an author? And I didn't understand what the word author was. And I was mortified because I quite considered myself, quite the reading buff, age 7. Really felt I ought to know every word there was. But actually did say, I don't know what that is. And she said, wait one moment. And she rushed off and came back with an Enid Blyton. And in those days, and I think possibly still now, there's sort of the signature of the Enid Blyton signature written on the bottom of the book.
Yeah.
And she said, you see, the lady who wrote this, she signed it and she wrote this just for you. And for many, many years, I actually did think Enid Blyton was sat at home just writing for me. Slightly slow processing there, but eventually, but it just suggested that there was this job, this amazing job where somebody would make something up. So I suspect The Magic Faraway Tree was the book that most influenced me.
Such
but
a
going
good
on,
book.
there's been hundreds. I remember reading behind the scenes of the museum.
At the museum.
Kate Atkinson's, and just thinking, wow, I understood everything and nothing at the same time, and that completely blew my mind, because it was at the time a very different way of looking at books, looking at characters and looking at how we form as characters. And I think the book starts with Ruby in the womb, and it was just so challenging. But on the other hand, I felt, because I'm a northerner and she's a northerner, and I'm very overly involved in my matriarchal family, and certainly was then. And I just thought, these are all every one of these people in my family. There's something of all of us in there, which showed how brilliant she was. So I think that's one of the books I always go back to and still absolutely love, and particularly the character of Ruby, who is laugh out loud and incomprehensible and brilliantly well known at the same time.
Have you ever been sort of intimidated by somebody else's writing into not being able to write? Has that ever?
I am ridiculously vain, because somebody once asked me a few years ago, somebody said, have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome? And I said, what's that? Completely.
Right.
Well, yes, it is. On a feminist level, it's really great. On a kind of knowing what's going on in the world level, probably not so clever of me, because I probably should be aware that other people feel intimidated that way. No, is my quick answer. No. If I read a book that is significantly better than anything I could write and it's absolute genius, I'm just so glad and thrilled for that person, and glad to be entertained, and think the only person I'm ever in competition with, and I mean this quite genuinely, is myself. Although I run a tough competition with myself and I'm pretty hard on myself. But I love seeing other people's success. It doesn't intimidate me. It doesn't put me off. I mean, I suppose if I'm really, really honest with myself, and if I could remember clearly enough and I wasn't sort of vague and 52, I suspect when I was about 26, because I think it's a very hard decade, your 20s, I suspect there will have been times then when I read all the time. I read voraciously. And I suspect there will have been moments then that I thought, oh gosh, I'll never be this good. And then I thought, oh, never mind, push on.
Yeah. No, that's good.
So I think that is the answer. And I would say that to everybody else. It would be the most depressing thing on earth for me if a debut novelist or a hoping to get published novelist said to me, oh, I feel put off because of what you've written. I would say, no, go for it,
Yeah. Well, thank goodness for that librarian. She sounds amazing.
Do you know, I think I met her.
Oh,
Years
really?
later,
What?
yes. She claimed, I mean, I can't remember because I was such a young child, but I was telling the story at a reading agency event to, I think, 500 librarians. And she said, that could well have been, she didn't say, I definitely said those words. She said that could well have been me, because I worked in that tiny little library in Eaglescliff in those years. And so I said, have it. And she said, I'm taking it. So it was quite funny little moment. You see, that was one of those little lies where we
could have been a total that was me, definitely.
Yes, she didn't say that was me, definitely, but because I think, maybe she suggested that to 50 kids. Maybe she was just like an amazing, wonderful woman
Yeah,
that
she
encouraged
sounds it.
lots of people. And also that's a bit of a learning, isn't it? Just keep telling kids they can do anything.
Yeah.
Just suggest
Yeah.
things to them. So, so I suspect it was a really big moment for me and a normal working day for her. Yeah.
It's a lovely story, though.
That is lovely. And actually, Adele, I must say that I think I sat on a table with you for a National Literacy Trust event, and Julie Cooper was on the same table.
Oh, yes. I think I've flitted in and out to that table because they move you around, don't they?
That's right. And then because you were one of the star guests, I think you were on our table for a bit, and then we're all very excited, and then off you went to another table. Oh. And it was like, oh, where's she gone?
Sorry. They do that.
It was great.
Shona, do any of your literary stories not involve Julie Cooper?
They ought not, can I say? Because I feel that should be our bar. We should all have... I feel that's what we should all say. I actually saw that. I know what event you mean, because I literally saw that photo the other day of me leaving and Julie grabbing me and giving me a big kiss on the cheek. And she literally hadn't... the first night she met me, that was that night. But she's just so generous and giving.
Legend. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, none of my stories don't involve Julie Cooper, in answer to your question. So we're going to move on to number 3, Adele, and it's a little bit more serious. But can you talk us through what your third idea would be to change the world?
It is, and it is a little bit more serious, but it is, I think these are all tied. I think the theme I keep coming back to is what we're allowed to say and what we do say. And I think there's another sort of wave that's happening that worries me as a writer and as a human being, actually, that there is an increased propensity towards a cancel culture, whereby we cancel people that we disagree with. And I think that's heartbreaking, actually. I think it's a very huge step back for humankind, because there are a lot of people I disagree with. I can't tell you how many, most of them, to be honest. But, there's a lot of people I disagree with. But I have found in life, the people I disagree with, if I am prepared to sit and listen to them, I learn something. I do not always end up agreeing with them at the end of the conversation, but I might understand them a little bit more and therefore move closer to a more peaceable environment and certainly a sense of personal peace. And so I don't think... I don't want to name names here. I'm very, very nervous. You see, I'm very nervous.
We were going to ask you to name names.
Okay, well, all right, I will then, because I'm also very honest. But for instance, I don't think any of us should cancel Piers Morgan. Even though,
come on.
I do see. No, I don't. I think Piers ought to go out there and rant and rave as much as he likes. And interestingly, and this shocks me, that's what he thinks too.
Yeah.
He wouldn't cancel anyone because he thinks, oh, go off. I'm paraphrasing, and please don't sue me, Piers, if you ever listen to this. But, he thinks, oh, go off, you snowflakey, wokey types, and have your stupid opinions that I disagree with. That's what he thinks. But he doesn't mind people who disagree with him having those opinions. Now, we might think, well, our opinions are not stupid or wokey or snowflakey. Our opinions are really valid. But he has a different one, so we can't cancel him. We can't just say, I want to shut you out because you disagree with me. Because that's like being 4-year-old. I'm sorry, it really is. It's like a toddler that closes their eyes and puts their hands over their ears and says things like, you can't, and thinks they can't be seen, and therefore, if they can't see the problem, they think they can't be seen. And it's just wrong. We need to find a way where we go, thank you very much. We might need to agree to disagree. And I think that's frightening. I'll be honest. It's frightening because there's some terrible things written in the world and committed to paper. We all have the option of not reading the things that terrify us, or, not watching TV shows or channels that we disagree with or whatever. We have the option to switch off or close the book or close the newspaper. We shouldn't have the option to switch off the person.
Do you think this move towards cancel culture, and you can kind of see the roots of it in that some of the ways, putting aside some of the topics that, cause these debates, the manner of debate can be so toxic that it is, it just feels like you don't want it, and even looking at, Prime Minister's question, the way that MPs conduct themselves sets a terrible example. But anyway, do you think that intelligent debate is dead? We've become so polarized. On Twitter and all social media, we're so...
It's a horrifying thought, if that is the thought, which is very possible. But one of the reasons intelligent debate is dead, I mean, there are countless reasons, and we could talk about it forever, and I would love to, because it's exciting. But one of the reasons is it's very easy now for us to pour something out on social media and just go, there you go, there's my opinion. And you can, if you want to, even stop people commenting back, which means you're sort of going, I think I'm right, here you go, don't care what anyone else thinks. Now, honestly, if you think you're that right and you don't care what anyone else thinks, just keep it to yourself. Just keep it to yourself. If you genuinely want a proper debate, then I think debates ought to have rules the way old school debating societies, when you were a child and you went to those things, you weren't allowed to name call, you weren't allowed to interrupt. There are points of order. Facts had to be checked. There were certain things that are part of a civilized debate. And I think we would all be better for civilized debate, but we don't get there because we're screaming and shouting at one another, and then the worst still, we're stomping out of the room. And I just think that's not allowing us to get things wrong. And all of us do get things wrong. I mean, some of my opinions over time, and undoubtedly now, are ludicrous and ridiculous, and I get them wrong. At the moment, I obviously don't think so. But at some point, someone will teach me something more if I keep my eyes and ears and heart and head open. Yeah. But if I cut off people, then I will never grow.
But, I mean, Piers did stomp out of the studio.
Oh, yes, I'm not saying he's right either. Yeah, I thought that was a bit of theatre. I don't know. Personally, I'm not that convinced by that. I'm sure the man's intelligent enough to hold it together if he wanted to. I think that's television for you. I think that's a totally different issue. I would be, I still believe in that thing that you can just quietly and calmly decide you don't want to listen to that person. Which is totally valid. You can leave a room at any point. You don't have to listen to other people. But I think what's more insidious is when you rally other people not to, because that is actually bullying.
It is.
And that's horrifying. Bullying is horrifying.
I mean, what you're saying is very wise. I totally agree with you. But
I'm very old.
You are not. So are we, Adele. I mean, when you first started out, was it quite intimidating? Were there any times when you wanted to walk out, or you genuinely just thought, I don't know what to say?
You mean in terms of starting out as a writer?
Yeah.
I had two incidents. One that I thought was funny, and one I thought was terrifying. So I'll tell you the funny one, which was the lovely Esther Ransom was interviewing me, and I thought I'd done a very good interview. I was a nervous wreck, but it was TV, and I thought I'd done quite well. And at the end of it, she sort of, should we do that again? And I thought, I thought I'd done quite well. And then she said, and have you got what? She said, have you got to change your clothes? And I thought, oh my Lord. And then she looked at me, and at the time I'd just given birth and I was breastfeeding, and I'd leaked all over.
No.
So I'm on national TV with a wet boob. Marvellous.
Oh, what a lovely woman. So did you re-record
Very lovely. She re-recorded it. She actually somebody lent me a dark jacket because I didn't have spare clothes with me. Now I know to do that. Oh. And she lent me a dark jacket so that I could wear it over the top. And then we just did it again, which was adorable of her. So yes, that was a very lovely one. The less lovely one, and I remember doing a library event with the, again, very lovely Lisa Jewell, who had been published a year before I was, and I always thought of as sort of a big sister in the whole process, and she has behaved as one all the way through. She's been an amazing sport. And we were doing this event, and somebody turned and said, and how do you feel about being labelled chick lit? And honestly, I think I live in a different world quite a lot of the time, because I sort of looked at it and I went, oh, what's chick lit, Lisa? Because I don't think we are we? I don't know what chick lit is. What's chick lit? And they thought I was being sort of sarcastic, but I genuinely didn't. And then they sort of said, well, it's about single women running around town with Chardonnay looking for Mr. Right. And I said, Well, it doesn't refer. Well, none of that's in my book, so I don't know why you've asked that question. And it was so rude of me, but I genuinely was just quite sort of like, I don't know, I just don't get it. And Lisa sort of rescued the situation. I mean, she defended the situation as well because it's quite a rude thing to say, and it is still a feminist issue. And I think realistically, that one has come up over and over and over again for the first, I would say, 10 years of my career. And that one I do find quite tricky to negotiate. I do have quite a good answer for it now, which is if that makes it a more accessible way for some people to approach reading, which I think it does. And now my work with the National Literacy Trust and the Reading Agency has explained that to me, that very, very highbrow literary books or even dark, frightening thrillers will put a lot of people off reading. But if you tell them, it's chick lit, it's really accessible, that can put people onto reading. So in fact, you can call me what you like, sticks and stones, will break my bones, but words don't ever hurt me, is the thought.
I think you were very polite to him considering the question.
I was just blindsided because I just was like, well, no, I'm not that. Why have you? I think it was a bit sort of like, oh, you silly man, why have you asked me that? Because it doesn't apply to me. I think I was sort of thinking that, really. Yeah. But, the same thing that I didn't really know about imposter syndrome. I really need to get some of these terms under my belt and be a little bit more zeitgeist or something.
It was probably refreshingly honest, to be honest, honest with you.
So just finally, we wanted to let you know that you're coming to Prima Donna Festival in July, which we're so excited about.
I am so excited.
Which is great news for us. Great news for you, I think, is that there are lots and lots of charity shops in Stowmarket where the festival is happening, because I believe you're a keen upcycler.
I am. Right? Yes.
Excellent.
And in fact, I came on the very first Prima Donna Festival, and that's exactly what we did do.
Did you?
I did. Yeah, yes. I went to charity. I always do. I went to charity shops. I pick up a bit of glassware. I love that. And I didn't buy any cabinets. I am known for buying cabinets and then bringing them home and doing them up and then thinking, literally nowhere to put that cabinet. Literally nowhere. Which, can I say, is the entire conversation that my family have with me when I'm parting with the cash in the first place. Like they'll say, "Oh, where's this one going?" Or have you got a colour in mind? And, that kind of trying to point out to me that literally a pink cabinet isn't going to go anywhere. But I love doing it. It's a lot of fun. It's quite creative. I think painting is it's quite repetitive, and so it's easy to switch off. And my mind quite often is still playing, and quite often I upcycle while I'm thinking about plots and such.
I know. Excellent. And there's also something about a good charity shop. I always think about who did that belong to? What was the story? Even if it's like a wedding dress, or not that I buy wedding dresses, but I just I always, ever hopeful. A whole wardrobe of wedding dresses.
Actually, that's really funny, because I always think about wedding dresses in charity shops, but I think who buys them? And I've worked out.
It's not me.
I think. Well, obviously, it's now we know it's Shona.
It's in case I marry Jilly Cooper.
In case you marry Jilly Cooper, which would be an awesome, and then you'd have a whole array of dresses to choose from. But I think it's Amdrams.
Yeah.
I think Amdram people often buy wedding dresses, and it makes me, again, I think I'm looking for a short story idea. I might use that.
There you
Excellent.
go.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We have to go shopping.
Thank you, women. Yes.
Yeah. We will all go shopping, the three of us.
Wedding dress shopping.
In July.
Can I just say, I'm not just plugging this festival because it's your festival, but it's an awesome festival. Oh. If there's people listening to this and thinking, should I, shouldn't I? Yes, you should.
You should.
Simple as that.
It was so great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. And it wasn't even dependent on glorious weather. So I don't want to hear that excuse from punters, right? I want you out there anyhow. It was just the general vibe. It was a really relaxed holiday. Everybody's there to have a good time. It's like when you go to a comedy gig, and everybody is there to have the best time they could possibly have. That was the festival.
It really was
inclusive. It was generous.
Do you know what? It was also very kind. Everyone was so kind to each other.
Correct.
Yeah,
yes. Yes, exactly. So
that's the best plug we've ever had. Thank you for that.
Thank you. We are so happy you're coming back this year.
We really can't wait. Thank you so much, Adele. It's been a pleasure, a real pleasure to talk to you tonight. And thank you for being on our podcast.
Thank you so much. I've had a great time.
Me too.
Thank you so much for listening to The World As It Should Be. We hope it inspires you to work towards shaping the world as you think it should be. You can find out more about Prima Donna Festival by going to primadonnafestival.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us 5 stars on iTunes and leave us a review. Tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify too and all good platforms.
The World As It Should Be from Prima Donna.